Mark Pettingill, thanks for taking time out today to meet with me with regards to marriage equality in Bermuda, and of course you've come out very positively in favour of the human rights side of things, and the fact that why should anybody be less equal than another segment of society? So perhaps you could just share with me your thoughts on this whole process and what this upcoming and pending referendum means on June the 23rd.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, I think, I've said in Parliament a number of times that, people have to approach this, in my view, in my assessment, kind of logically and sensibly. And I think the first question to be asked is, or the first thing to understand is that this is a human issue. And I think the first question to ask, is, are you dealing, and it sounds a bit silly, but this is really the way to approach it, are you dealing with human beings? And any time that you can look at a living being and ask yourself the first question, are they human? Once they're in that category for me, and I think once they're in that category for right-thinking people, I think once they're in that category for right-thinking spiritual people, right-thinking, in my view, religious people, that once they address the question, are we dealing with human beings, then the next question to ask is, should all human beings be entitled to the same rights, the same privileges as any other human being? I believe that that is the reflection of the true development of human beings, of mankind. I believe it's the true development of politics. I believe it's the true development of intellectual thought. I believe it's the true development of philosophy. And I believe it really must be, at a higher level of thinking, the true development of a society. I think we have evolved to this, and I think that it is where we need to be. And I think if people embrace that as a concept, no matter what their religious belief may be, no matter what their ethical belief may be, and there's something of an intellectual exercise there. One might take the position of, I don't necessarily approve or agree with somebody's lifestyle, right?
Correct.
But that doesn't mean you have to separate from the fact. That might be a moral issue, that might be an issue, like some people believe in sex before marriage, some people don't, and so on and so forth. That doesn't make them any less human than the other person. That doesn't mean that they're not any less entitled to the same rights as the other individuals. So I think if we get people on the page of saying, should all human beings, I'd have this as a referendum question, should all human beings be entitled to the same rights as other human beings?
Right.
Now, of course, there's classes where, when it comes to things about individual freedom and all the rest of it, well, we have to have balances with regard to punishment and crime and all the rest of it. Those are separate issues, things like that. Right. This is an issue where, you have individuals that are abiding by all the rules, and there's not those issues with regard to crime and punishment and so on. Are they entitled to the same rights? I think fundamentally that the answer to that must be yes. And I've often said this, I make this point. If someone was taking somebody to court, a church, if someone was taking a church to court to try and get an order through the court that the church must marry them, same-sex couple in the church, I would be the first person, if asked, to defend the rights of the church to not allow those people to be married there.
Correct, and that's what happened.
Quite right, and that's quite right. And
right.
That is because I am a great believer in religious freedom. I might not agree with all of the doctrine.
And it's protected by law.
It's protected by law, and
right.
People have that right. And if you have, a religion that adheres to a certain, ideology and a certain rule set and all the rest of it, and that's religious freedom.
Correct.
And that's been around for a long time. So we can all coexist. It's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do and what you have to do with your group, but you can't tell me what to do with mine either.
Right.
And you can't come along and impose your beliefs, your ethics, your morality onto me if I choose to have something different.
If I could just interject here, Mark, obviously, America has come a long way in the sense that the Supreme Court of America ruled in favor, ruled that same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states.
Sure.
And it was a Supreme Court ruling. Obviously very much supported by the President Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Now, other black church leaders in America, i.e. the Reverend Al Sharpton and the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Al Sharpton says this. He says, this is a civil rights matter, not a religious matter, right?
Good.
And he said, and who are we when there are 1,000 different variations of Christianity to say that one, you have to follow one over the other? He said, this is about civil rights matter, and everybody should be equal under the law.
Sure. I mean, certain religious doctrines supported slavery for, thousands of years, hundreds of years. Certain churches supported segregation for, up into the last century. And that was, in the justification there was a religious basis for that, in certain instances. People can, spin that as they want to. But if that's your belief, that's fine. You're entitled to that belief. If you want to believe that that God is a little green man that sits on a planet somewhere and that he answers my prayers and I pray to him, that's your belief. I would support you in that belief. I might think it's wacky, but as long as it's not hurting anybody else, I wouldn't try and take away your right to do that. And that's where it is. The question there would be, are you a human being? Are you entitled to religious freedom? Are you entitled to a spiritual study? And the answer to that has to be fundamentally yes. Am I entitled to come along and say no because I think that's really wacky and it's upsetting to me and I don't like it, that I'm going to stop you from doing it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, really, Bermuda, it's all part of the evolution of going to doing the right thing by all people. I mean, when I think back to as a kid growing up in Bermuda, my dad had a record shop on the corner of Church Street and Queen Street, and there was a gathering outside one night, and I said, Dad, what's that? And he said, well, the people out there are protesting about the fact that they cannot sit upstairs in the cinema. And that was at the theatre boycott of 1959, and that was wrong. As was people that were frowned upon, or it was frowned upon or condemned that, if you married a person of a different race. Today we think of such matters as that, how insane. I mean,
people had that, there was, religion came into play there, and that's quite right. And we have to look back, because what troubles me is if you took the words out of it, sometimes the arguments you hear being propagated against same-sex marriage, against same-sex couples, are the same arguments of bigotry that have been made in relation to race, in relation to religion, in relation to interracial couples. All of those arguments have been made over the centuries. They're archaic, but they're the same arguments.
Yes.
And we hear the same argument today in relation to this. And I often think, wow, are these people hearing themselves speak? Because sometimes they could be, speeches that were made in relation to other issues, whether it was slavery or it was, discrimination of some form, or whether it was segregation. Same arguments. And then you always hear the same thing. Well, let's just slow it down a bit. But right is right. There's no slow down right. Human rights are human rights. And if you're saying yes, they're human, there's no slow down to that. There's no let's wait and let everybody get comfortable with it. Get on with it.
Well, let me put this to you. And there are some people that are saying, and it's being mentioned on several of the blogs and on social media and so on and so forth.
Don't do those anymore. But
okay. some people are saying, why are we having a referendum over something so fundamental as human rights? Now, I know that you're part of the government, and the Premier decided that the government has decided to have a referendum. Now, some people are saying, well, this is a bit strange to have a non-binding referendum over rights, over people's rights. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that, the government has taken the approach that, because let's face it, I mean, you saw yourself, if you took it like, there were support and protests and all the rest of it. It's a divided, issue. We have a very religious community, that has a lot of say in politics as well, rightly or wrongly, but they do. And I think it's a question of, wanting to be able to say to everybody, and this happened with the immigration issue, that we want to ensure that there's been consultation, and we want to ensure that you've been heard, and that if you feel strongly about it, then you've got a right to say something, and, we want to hear what you have to say by way of, referendum. For me personally, I don't care if it's 99% against gay marriage in the referendum. It's still going to be, for me, it's still going to be a human issue. And I don't think it changes the legal position one iota, because that framework's been set by the European Court of Human Rights. It's very much set. You have to find a framework to ensure that there are equal rights for same-sex couples. Correct. So the referendum won't change that.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes, because if one goes by polls, now polls are obviously snapshots of whether it's 400 people or 500 people.
Sure.
And there were Bernews polls, and there were Royal Gazette polls. And then there was a Cordell Riley poll. But the Royal Gazette and the Bernews polls, if you look at the numbers on their polls point to, especially within the last year, point to this being, a successful situation, that same-sex marriage will be will come through. Now, that's just a poll. Now, obviously, when people go to the polls and vote, that what those numbers will turn out to be, I don't know. I presume that you're going to have your church vote and you're going to have your younger vote, and it's going to shake out the way it is. But that being said, as you said, well, the courts, the European Court has said you have to find a way, you have to find a pathway, a framework. Yeah. So let's put it this way: if the way I see it, would we not be right in assuming it? The minimum that's going to happen in Bermuda will be a civil union situation.
I think that legally, no matter what the outcome is, a civil union situation has to occur. Right. Ensuring that the same, rights are embodied as heterosexual couples that get married, And I think that, it's just a question of a rose by a rose as any other name, as long as you embody all of those same rights. So the nonsense becomes, why not call it marriage? And people will say, that's...
My point would be, it's just as you said, you would defend a church if they did not want to marry somebody. Sure. You would defend. So by the same token, couldn't we not say that, same-sex marriage, yes, vote yes for same-sex marriage. Those churches that do not wish to marry somebody, you don't have to.
Oh, I totally think that's right.
I
think that's being said, and I think that, by the way, I think the Constitution, because of religious freedom that's embodied in that, and in the Human Rights Act as well, I think that clearly protects that. There's no conundrum there. Right. You can't go along and say to a minister whose ardent belief is that marriage is between a man and a woman, that he has to marry this same-sex couple. That would be fundamentally wrong. That's his belief, and again, you can't enforce his belief on it. But importantly, he can't, that minister, whoever he might be, say, well, that couple shouldn't be married anywhere. I've said this, I said it in Parliament many times. The church might marry you, but it's always that court that divorces you.
That's right.
Nobody goes to church to get divorced.
Well, I remember when my parents...
The court that divorces you, right?
I remember when my parents met back in 1949, and my father was a Catholic, and my mother was a Protestant.
Right.
And I think he had to get some very special permission to get married to my mother in the cathedral, St. Teresa's. Very special permission, because it was sort of like, okay, well, you're not speaking.
Trying to do if you were a black and white couple back then.
Well, exactly. So really, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the human rights situation.
Sure it does.
And also, it's how many people in Bermuda have a family member or know of a family member or have a distant cousin or so on and so forth. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're black, white, whether you're, Bermudian, English, American, Portuguese, Filipino, or whatever. This is what happens in society. Some people are gay and some people aren't.
Because it's a natural thing. That's what's going to happen. It's a natural thing. People are born gay. And this argument, that has been propagated about the time that people turn gay or this or whatever. Now, the problem is maybe from when they're very young, they hide it, and they've struggled, some of them emotionally, for many, many years. And thankfully in this society, because they can be embraced now, they get the courage to be able, hopefully at a young age as well, to say, that I'm a gay person, I'm gay. Right. I fundamentally believe that is how people are born, whether it's God or Mother Nature or whatever it is. I think that is just human, that is the design, of nature.
That's right.
Now, and that's the way it is, So
let me ask you this.
I know we agree on this.
I presume, knowing where you stand, Mark, I know you're going to vote yes for marriage equality. I can't.
Of course. I mean,
of course you are.
You have to take both yeses.
Yes, you're going to take both yeses, and I think that I would urge people have a real strong look at the separation of put religion here and whatever you want to believe in over here, if you can do that, and at least give people their rights in society to have the same rights. You see, the thing is, if civil unions come in. There are a lot of people that are saying, well, civil unions are that's a situation for gay people. Yeah. Straight people can't have a civil union. There's an inequality about that.
There is. There's a very valid argument to be had there, I think, which is a bit more technical, legal argument. But I saw a bumper sticker today. Obviously, somebody spent a lot of money going and printed up bumper stickers saying, on the referendum on June 23rd, say no to both questions. Mm-hmm. Now, I get the marriage thing because that's a religious argument. I could tell that this was a religious person in the car because they had a big wheel design, with a quote from the Bible on it. So and then they had the sticker right there saying, "Vote no to both questions." And I got to say, I was behind them on my bike, and my heart was aching because I could understand their logic, though I fundamentally disagree with it on the marriage issue, because they're going to say that's ordained by the church and so on. But on the second issue, for me, I just don't know where the head is at or how it got there. And I think that's just a lot of indoctrination that has poisoned the mind with regard to dealing with their fellow human beings, as brothers and sisters, and saying, that you don't believe. Because what you're saying by that statement is, if you're saying no to civil unions, you're saying, I do not believe that those people have the same human rights as I do. And my colleague and my fellow director here, Sean Crockwell, said it in Parliament brilliantly the other night, because when we brought up the amendment on human rights in relation to mental health, and there were people saying, now we need to do with age discrimination, all the rest of it, and Sean stood up and said, you cannot cherry pick on what you discriminate on. Once it's discrimination, it's discrimination.
Correct.
You can't say, oh, I'm, against discrimination over here, but I'm for this form of discrimination. That's what people have to get down. If you are anti any form of discrimination, ergo, then you are for same-sex couples having the same right as everybody else, and ergo, you are for gay marriage, but you are certainly for civil unions. If you are prepared to say, if you say to a person, are you a discriminatory person? There is no logic in the world, in my view, where they can say, no, I'm not a discriminatory person, but I am against gays having the same rights to marry as anybody else. It just doesn't fly. It's just not logical. Yeah. You have to say, yes, I believe in discrimination. And 90% of me isn't discriminatory in relation to these things, but when it comes to this, I'm discriminatory. Mm-hmm. And that, boy, that's an age-old argument. You go back to Deep South and, not so long ago, even today, you have people running around thinking they're not racist and they're not this and, they're not discriminatory. But, ask them if they think that, a mixed couple should get married in this church or whatever. Well, no, I don't believe in that. But I'm not discriminatory. I'm not racist. But once you carve out segments of it, you can't cherry pick, as Sean said, and say, well, I'm not discriminatory in this little part, but I am over here. But that's okay because it's a reflection of my belief and my religious belief. Right. And I love to be able to sit down and have these types of argument, whether it's with, ministers or bring it on or whoever, people in the church. But the truth of the matter is that it's very difficult to argue with people that are full-bore indoctrinated. If they have a very, very fixed belief, they will stay with that until the cows comes home, or or Jesus comes again. They're not going to change, their view on that. I'm more of a New Testament guy. I think, well, what would Jesus do? I think he'd be out there handing out these flyers. That's
yes, that's what
my heart and mind is. That's what I honestly think that he'd be doing. That we're all God's children, and that you can't discriminate against one another. And I think that's what's embraced. And he might not have necessarily approved of all of the lifestyle or whatever. That's not the same thing. That's a different choice. Is it right to discriminate against your fellow human being? And the answer has to be fundamentally no. There can't be any prevarication on that. There can't be any kind of cherry picking. Well, it's okay when you do it here, but not okay to do it here. Yes, if you cherry pick it, then you are a bigot, or you are, in my view, you are a racist. You are homophobic. You can't cherry pick on saying, well, yeah, just this part or not so much in here. And this whole let's slow it down a bit argument just doesn't fly. That's my view. People feel very strongly about it. I hope at the end of the day, I think this will be at the end of the day that, remember, people have to have love in their hearts first, because there's no kind of anger or aggression to be had about this. I feel sorry for people that, don't get it, and I pity them. I pity their kids if they bring them up like that too,
The other thing I wanted to touch on is that we've seen in America what happened when now I know this wasn't about same-sex marriage, but it was about discrimination. It was about discrimination of transgenders in North Carolina and in Mississippi and so on and so forth. And what happened was it created such a furor that many hundreds even of American companies said, well, if you don't back off on that, we're going to boycott your state.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I've done is really interesting is that every airline that flies to Bermuda, every one of them are diversity friendly and marriage equality friendly.
Of course,
right? Every cruise line coming here is marriage equality friendly and diversity friendly. Hotels such as the Fairmont, the Hamilton Princess, and the Fairmont Southampton are diversity friendly. There are many other companies in Bermuda that are diversity and marriage equality friendly, and even in international business, some of their charters are it's cast that we cannot discriminate against anybody because of their sexual orientation and so on and so forth. And this is becoming the way of the world, whether you be Nike, whether you be, a hotel chain like the Ritz-Carlton, for instance, that are coming here. So, it's worth bearing in mind that when the rest of the world is doing the right thing, what would be great is to see Bermuda to do the right thing or have marriage equality. We'd be ahead of the Caribbean. Now, we've got competition, regardless of human rights. There's also the commercial aspect of marriage equality, and that is honeymoons, weddings, and so on and so forth. Now,
none of us went to South Africa when it was apartheid, right?
No,
we would have gone then. We weren't going. People, he said,
exactly.
You want to go to South Africa? I'm like, no. And they were, and the whole world was saying, no, you can't go. You can't do business there. So we didn't do business, and we didn't go, and because of apartheid. And that changed the world.
And Fidel Castro's daughter is leading the charge in Cuba. Now, Cuba, of course, has just opened up. Barack Obama's just opened it up. There's going to be a huge rush into tourism in Cuba as they rebuild infrastructure and hotels and so on and so forth. You throw that open too. Bermuda, I would love to see Bermuda be equal for everybody. If we have that, well, then the human rights issue is covered, and then we have also a business opportunity. Now, LGBT tourism is huge. It's massive. It's in the billions of dollars. And so I think people should really not forget that there is another side to this.
No, you're quite right, Tony. There is, and that's why I say when it comes to people opposing and so on, these are the types of things that can really give you a focus that you don't want. Don't want. It's like when we had protests recently on the Hill, with regard to people protesting immigration thing. It ended up on CNN. I mean that. Well, in the sense that the US put out a travel advisory in relation to it. It doesn't take much for us to get on a world stage in a negative way. We're trying to compete for people coming here and all the rest of it. If people get the concept, Bermuda, they're homophobic, they're anti-gay, they don't have equal rights there across the board, they don't have human rights across the board. Man, would you go to that place on vacation? I wouldn't.
No.
That's not a place. That's not a
that's
place that I would be going. And I stand on that. There's places in the world where, I feel like that I haven't gone as a result of what their human rights issues are.
Correct.
You don't run off and say I'm going to go on I'm so opposed to what that government's doing, but I want to go and see the place, so I'll go on a vacation.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't do that. That's what happened with Rosie ODonnell on the cruise here.
Well, that is interesting, isn't it? You brought up Rosie because, we'll wrap this up in a minute. But Rosie, that was 2007.
Yeah.
And I remember the Premier at the time, Ewart Brown, was sort of aghast about what was happening about people. We're going to stand on the dock with placards, and Rosie got wind of this and said, no.
Well, that's right. You don't bother. We're not coming.
We're not going to come. Yeah. And the Premier at the time said, look, we do welcome everybody to Bermuda. Yeah. And was the right thing for him to have said. Yeah. Then, of course, what happened was it just drifted.
Who was that a victory for?
Well,
we all lost. We all lost.
And it always takes something, one event, to start a ball rolling. Now, we do know that there were other organisations like the Rainbow Alliance, Two Words and a Comma, lots of other Marriage Equality Bermuda have been sort of fighting this corner. But it was last year, almost a year ago, that there was in April of 2015, there was a story about the lesbian couple on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean wanting to get married, and they were denied marriage by the captain because our boat's registered to Bermuda. I can't do this. And they got in the paper, and that's why
a lot of boats are,
That's why I created the petition. Yeah. I was blogging on Facebook, and somebody said, why blog? Yeah. Start a petition. Yeah. And so that got things rolling. And I must say that whilst it might not have been something any government wanted to tackle at the time, the petition, basically focused this issue. The government had to take stand. Patricia Pamplin did have the town hall meetings, and there was the dialogue. Yeah. And so now we have this this referendum, and I guess because of the sensitivity on both political sides and so on and so forth, to gauge the public's feeling. But at the end of the day, it would be great, if Bermuda comes out and votes yes, and we get a majority of yes, then it makes it rather easy for both parties to say, okay, let's just make this happen, guys. Rather than having to go to somebody like you and challenge it through the courts.
I mean, it's going to happen, whichever way it goes. I mean, but it would be great to see it happen like that. I think it puts us in good stead. But let me just say this, Tony, I know you close out, but I think you're to be hugely commended for the work you've done on this. Particularly a heterosexual individual coming along and showing this much support, because I know that you believe it's a human issue first.
That's right. Exactly.
And the fact of the matter is, I've always found it quite astounding that some prominent gay people in our society, some prominent gay politicians, have not stood and shouted it from the rooftops. No. And equal rights must be the course, and have not stood in Parliament and spoken on it. I found that astounding many years ago when Renee Webb brought the issue to the table. That was the first time that two words in common came. That must have been 10 years ago now, 12 years ago.
And Renee's been very supportive.
Yeah, and that House of Assembly at the time sat in silence, I think to its great shame. Yes. And did not say anything to support her position on it, with gay members in the House around about her who didn't speak on the subject, And I've at least been heartened to see that people are prepared to, speak on it openly now on both sides of the House. But for some reason, people will sit quietly by, and I don't think that's good enough. I think that history will record you as when I had nothing to say, and I couldn't certainly. I've spoken about that with my older children especially, and they've asked about it, and they asked the questions. They were very supportive. Of equal rights across the board, but they know full well that there's no way that I'd be prepared, in 10 years or so on, when they're in their 20s and 30s, I could see them asking me the question, Dad, you always had so much to say, rightly and wrongly over the years. Why did you say nothing on that?
Correct.
I think it would have been, great shame. I would have been shamed by that, and I think other people will be. I think other people are going to find that at some point, there are kids who are teenagers now, and their kids are in their 20s now. As time goes on, they retire from politics. There's right-thinking kids at some dinner party or whatever are going to say, why did you not speak up on that when it's, when we pass this here? And
Mark, I will thank you in closing too for you speaking out on this. And thank you for your kind words in my direction. But, I think that if Bermuda comes out and vote, listen, Ireland, Catholic Ireland, last year, the lady that ran the campaign, Grania Healy, in 3.5 short months, they canvassed the whole of Ireland, and Catholic Ireland voted overwhelmingly for same-sex marriage. Mexico's the same way. Catholic countries in South America.
Wow.
It's happening. And you know what, Bermuda? Let's do the right thing. Let's be on the right side of history.
Do the right thing. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Yeah.